Skiing, sunshine, spectacular scenery. Colorado is renowned for the natural beauty that comes with being set in the middle of the majestic Rockies. Making world-class wine? It's not quite as homogeneous an analogy.
When you hear Colorado, that's actually what happened to me when I moved to the United States. Never thought about wine. You know, you think about elk and mountain skiing and all this good stuff.
Just like its beauty, proud Coloradans champion their beer and whiskey, locally raised meat and produce, and just about every other craft product produced here. Colorado wine, however, continues to be a misunderstood or even completely ignored commodity.
I've had a lot of people talk about Colorado wines also in a sense that they've tried it, but they really haven't been huge fans.
My impression of Colorado wine is that sometimes it's a little more expensive than wine from other parts of the U.S. and that it's a little sweet.
Never had the experience of even hearing about a Colorado wine, so I don't really know much about it.
The perceptions, often rooted in long past history, are not always fair or deserved, and they can easily scare the timid. Fortunately, Colorado's hard-working producers are anything but timid. They are explorers, facing harsh consumer and high-altitude realities every day as they continue to build an industry that Colorado can be proud of. This is a story about the progression of Colorado wine, its pioneering families facing rugged growing conditions and endless unknowns, and the next generation staked with building a new reputation on both the regional and world wine stage.
I think a whole lot of people questioned our sanity when we started growing grapes.
We're pushing the limits of where things can be done.
This is my home, and I'm not moving. And yeah, we're crazy.
Well, Wine Spectator gave my can an 86. Highest score ever for a can of wine.
More or less color, Pinot Gris, a color mutation from the same background.
The modern history of Colorado wine was planted in the late 1960s, after decades of dormancy following Prohibition. The first Grand Valley farmers and producers used little more than a guess-and-check attitude and unparalleled optimism in figuring out how to grow vines in Colorado. Their early successes led to exploration all along the western slope and the rebirth of an industry.
We actually started the winery in 1988. We put our first vineyard in 1981. And we knew we wanted to have a winery someday. It was sort of a dream at that point. We weren't ready to start the winery yet, but it was either raise pigs or raise grapes. So we decided on grapes. We put our first vineyard in that next spring. You're away from the phone calls. You're away from all the people. They have to come find you. Being out there in the vineyard is one of the best parts of the whole business.
Parker Carlson, Sue and Doug Phillips, Doug and Ann Seawald, and Bennett Price, Rick Turley, Stephen Smith. Not exactly household names in Colorado. Yet they started replacing peach trees and cherry orchards in the Grand Valley in the 70s and 80s with a dream of making a career in Colorado wine. Despite the skeptics, they trusted their instincts that wine could and would work here.
It was a rocky start because Ivancy Winery, which was started before everybody else and was gone under before everybody else started. Then Colorado Mountain Vineyards came along, Jim and Ann Seawald, who are really, owe them so much I can't express how much we owe them, the industry does. And they had a rocky time for a long time, you know. They couldn't pay their bills.
Sometimes making mistakes is the only way to really learn. Before today's bevy of trained winemakers made their way to Colorado, The vintners learn through experience alone, and mishaps that are only easy to laugh about today. It wasn't always pretty.
Personal disasters in the winery. One I remember is one of our plum wines. We make fruit wine as well as grape wine, but it had started to ferment on its own and it had plugged up the fermentation lock. So took a rag, put it over the top, pulled off the cork. It pushed the rag all the way to the ceiling with this beautiful geyser of this plum stuff.
It was in the middle of winter, the parking lot was icy, and Bill was coming out of the winery with the forklift with barrels on a barrel rack, and he was coming out forward down the incline, and I was like, whoa. Well, all of a sudden, the barrels came off of the barrel rack, and I'm inside the winery, and Bill jumps off the forklift, slips on the ice, falls flat on his back. I come running out of the winery, slip on the ice, trip over Bill, and the barrel is rolling down Main Street in Evergreen. I ran out and got it, and it literally missed hitting a car by this much. It made me a better winemaker.
These exploits add to the romance of the industry, but they also resulted in wines that were often flawed, overly sweet, or just plain bad. There were plenty of true gems in the early days, but it only took one bad bottle to prevent a new wine drinker from trying Colorado ever again. Today's winemakers, armed with more experience, training, and improved consistency every vintage, are seeking to turn those early impressions around.
I've made some really good wines, and I've made some wines that are pretty stinkers.
My first experience with Colorado wine was, I don't know, many years ago when you couldn't buy booze on Sundays, and the only booze that you could buy was Colorado wine. So I ended up going down to a cigar store downtown that sold it, picked up a bottle. It was a little bit pricey, but I thought, you know, what the heck? So I get it, and I try it, and I honestly wasn't impressed with the quality. So I never bought another bottle of Colorado wine after that.
1 decade ago, Carlson Vineyard's 2003 Riesling took a giant stride toward overcoming past perceptions and proving the quality of Colorado wine to the rest of the world. It beat Rieslings from just about every premier producing region on the planet to be crowned the world's best Riesling. Since then, scores from the wine writers have consistently ticked upward, and there's reason to believe this trend will continue.
I never really thought that I would make the best wine in the world. I thought that I could make wine that was very good. In 2004, we won the World Riesling Cup against Rieslings from all over the world. And it was really kind of fun saying, oh no, I'm from Colorado. Can you grow grapes in Colorado, make wine? Well, yeah, we do. We made this. I don't consciously remember ever thinking that it wouldn't be a go. And I kept thinking, well, if I sell out, I'll make a little more. If I sell out, I'll make a little more. Maybe it was just that I didn't have the foresight to worry about it.
Research, development, and time play a large role in determining what grapes to grow, not just in Colorado, but in any established or aspiring wine-producing region. It took the French centuries to figure out that Cabernet Sauvignon was the ideal grape for Bordeaux and Pinot Noir Burgundy. By comparison, Colorado is the new kid on the block, having only been testing grapes to its land for a few decades.
We have farmed here in my family for over 100 years now. Peaches has been the heart of what we do. Prohibition, of course, wiped out the grape industry here, and we're having, in recent years, to rebuild it and relearn some of the things that had been learned by the Italians and the early people that came in here and started it years ago.
The varieties that I think do best in Colorado, definitely the Rhone varieties like Syrah, Viognier, Roussanne. I think Cab Franc does pretty well. They have this kind of character that's halfway between like a New World fruit bomb, but they still maintain the acid.
It's mountain state, and growing wine here is just literally growing grapes on the edge.
Colorado doesn't have the scale of research funds and space available as other states. A test vineyard in Washington can be as large as the state's entire growing region. But through the Department of Agriculture's partnership with Colorado State University, it has both a full-time viticulturalist and enologist examining, growing, and experimenting at vineyard test sites across the western slope. Their work, combined with the toil of vineyard managers over the decades, has led to one conclusion: Colorado grapes soak up the unique flavors of the mountain soil, producing award-winning examples of some of the world's most famed grapes.
These bottles are wines made from experimental varieties that we're trying out.
We also had Riesling, Riccardsatelli. We had 2 vinifera varieties. We also had up to 9 clones of Pinot Noir that we looked at as a clonal study in Pinot Noir. We had a German red called Dornfelder.
So we think that out of the, say, 30-some varieties that we're trying, we've probably got at least half a dozen, maybe 10, that we would consider successfully grown. I think there's probably another 10 that will find a place even if they aren't as accepted as that first 10.
Exploration includes finding pockets of land that grow well-known grapes such as Cabernet, Syrah, or Chardonnay, as well as areas more suited for lesser-known hybrids like Baco Noir or NY76. These cold, hardy varieties can survive the state's unpredictable weather patterns more consistently than traditional vinifera, the traditional grapes that make most of the wines on shelves today.
Grand Valley, you can grow anything. Paonia, Riesling, Gewürztraminer, some of the best Gewürztraminer I've ever made. Cortez, the unknown. We don't, we have so much to discover down there yet. They are growing vinifera. They're looking in, they're growing hybrids as well.
In California, you often have, very symmetric, pretty vines with a single cane. Here, that's not a good idea. We come up with 2, 4, 6 canes, depending on what's going on. And between those, we'll get a crop in most cases. So we're learning how to be a more consistent producer under Colorado conditions.
I came over here, learned about the grapes, and I'd been making wine for 40 years, so I started making some wine, and I could make world-class wine out of the grapes I got here.
If we have a tough growing season with a late spring frost or a harsh winter or drought conditions, then then we have certain challenges that we have to face. In a good year, the fruit is as good as any fruit that I've made wine with anywhere in the world.
With more than 30 years of modern winemaking under its belt, Colorado has developed its identity as a frontier wine region filled with the potential to make just about any type of wine, with complex flavors born of growing at high, sunny altitudes. Even with years of industry growth, the new wave of winemaking is holding true to the established tradition that Colorado wineries are micro-sized, driven by family, and enough creativity to overcome hurdles typically solved by corporate budgets.
I basically wrote a business plan to start a winery in downtown Denver, and basically bought an old Dodge truck which was $1,000, and the only lights that worked on it were the snowplow lights, and drove 25,000 miles in 2 months and picked up every single piece of equipment used, either from a winery that was going out of business or a winery that was expanding. We didn't start with millions of dollars. We had to really bootstrap it. And so I'd basically drive the truck back and forth to Palisade and bring the fruit back to Denver and do all of the production here in the city. And you could be middle of November, it could be a foot of snow on Vail Pass, and you're driving that fruit over the mountains in a pretty sketchy kind of environment. And the trailer, 6 tons of fruit on the back of a trailer jackknifing everywhere, and it's this kind of chaotic system. I mean, that's what I see Colorado viticulture and winemaking is. It's a chaotic system, and somehow we end up with something that approaches this work of art in a bottle.
I have to share my space sometimes with the restaurant. So I might be in the middle of doing something and I'm told, hey, we have an event, so you need to make sure that your winery is ready, open, that we have room. So in that aspect, that can be a bit challenging, but the good outweighs the bad.
My son he grew up with me here. He's been let's see, making wine since before he was a teenager. And now he knows everything about it that I do, really. The younger people that I've seen coming in, that's also really good because young people have bring in a new perspective. My son, for instance, has a little different way of approaching things, and so a lot of times I'll have some kind of problem. Usually it's a structural problem, in the winery, or how to deal with this physical situation, and he'll come up with a better idea than I had. He's good at that, you know what I mean? And so that kind of energy and new thought of young people is great.
The world's major wine regions featured businesses that began small before blossoming into international brands. Mondavi, Penfolds, Kendall Jackson. Colorado's winemakers will always stay small by comparison. A few thousand cases of wine per year rather than tens of thousands or more. Production potential is limited by the land, which just means Colorado can thrive as a boutique region of note, driven by family business.
Probably 99% of the wineries in Colorado, they're all family. And I think that's what makes us a special group, is that this is our business, this is our livelihood, and we take it to heart, and we are proud. I am not technically family, however, I'm treated like family.
Talbot Farms is a family organization that has been growing fruit here since the mid-1940s. And we took over from my granddad, and then the roots go back for a couple of generations beyond that.
The primary thing that drives us to be where we are and do what we're doing is simply a love of living on the land and doing something in agriculture to stay. It's been a wonderful place to raise our children. Our kids are 17 and 20 now, and they grew up on the farm here. It's been great for that. We love making wine, and although it's challenging, it's also very interesting making wine out of the grapes that are grown here.
There's many parameters that kill a grape. First of all, mismanagement, then drought, bugs, pests, diseases, pathogens, all of that, and then overcropping, for example, too.
Colorado winemakers constantly hone their skills on barrel aging, fermenting practices, grape crushing, and the science behind producing good wine in general. As with all agricultural pursuits, Mother Nature can get in the way, forcing frontier ingenuity to keep finding ways to overcome vintage after vintage.
I try not to look at the weather reports very often. Unfortunately, this past January, I was in the Grand Valley when we had those record low temperatures over in Grand Junction. I believe it got down to -18. Our vineyard, I believe, got down to 1. So obviously we know we're gonna have some damage from that. We had a freeze actually back in the winter of 2009, and we knew that was going to affect the harvest, but then we had a late freeze in 2010, and as a result, a lot of people were short on grapes, including us. It is what it is, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
People have been losing vineyard yields dramatically because we've had 3-4 very cold years in the last 5, and so they're struggling in the vineyard. And people eventually say, I'm sick and tired of struggling and not getting yields. And so 2 options exist. We either, and unfortunately some growers do, they give up, which I find short-sighted because there's a big infrastructure that exists. 10,000 plus an acre invested, host Vias irrigation systems, and they just say we're going to walk. Rather than considering the second option, which is growing some of those cold hardy hybrids and sell them to winning wineries. And that's where we right now have a big sales job.
5 things that keep me up at night as a vineyard manager here in Western Colorado. Number 1 is cold damage. And there's two different flavors of cold damage. One is early frost in the fall, late frost in the spring. And also the midwinter lows, which is the event we just had here. Vines are, especially vinifera vines, are susceptible to all of those things. The other things that give us difficulty is making wine on a very, very small scale. And marketing is difficult. We're out in the middle of nowhere, really, in Paonia here. It's also difficult to find labor, help. We're not an established vineyard where you have, crews of migrant workers that are coming around and know how to prune grapes. Most of us here have had to learn how to prune grapes, especially pruning grapes in this kind of a climate. It's a different set of techniques than you would use somewhere else. And so you have to, if you have help, you have to train them from scratch almost.
Working in the unpredictable mountainous climate is a hurdle. The people's opinion is another. Despite the gains in quality, consistency, and growth that has led to more than 100 wineries producing in Colorado, local wine isn't part of the locavore dialogue just yet, and plenty of poor associations remain. It stands as one of the biggest challenges facing Colorado wineries today.
Branding, non-existent.
I would say just not being informed of the different types, different companies. That's probably the only reason why I haven't tried it, really.
I've never bought it.
There definitely seems to be a trend for people who want to support Colorado businesses and Colorado agriculture. For some reason, it doesn't seem like that leap has been made to the wine industry. If the Colorado wine industry can learn from the marketing efforts of the beer and the distillery side of things, I think they could make huge inroads.
Of the wines now compared to 25, 30 years ago are immensely better. There were good wines back then, but there were a whole lot more stinkers. There's still stinkers, but there are wines out there now that I think, ooh, wow, I'd buy it. And to me, that's one of my highest praises. But it's going to be a long time to get the reputation of the area up, of the state up. It used to be, we heard all the time, oh, I didn't know you had made wine in Colorado. Even local people saying that, Colorado people. Anymore, you hear that occasionally, but there'll be a month go by that I don't hear it. And if you hear it, it's usually from somebody from out of state. So the word is getting out, and the wineries, a lot of the wineries have won enough awards in international competitions that the wine industry is starting to realize we're here. It's amazing now with over 100 wineries. It's just people I haven't even heard of, or wineries I haven't even heard of, which is neat. It's really exciting.
I would try Colorado wine. I would try any kind of wine or any kind of beverage for that matter if it was recommended. And I don't really hear that, It's probably hard to think of Colorado producing different liquors. Beer stands out so much and there's so many options and so forward.
Now it's time to figure out how to build off the momentum and progress in the winery and win over, or win back, the Colorado drinking public who have always been quick to support its beer and spirits.
What's held the industry back in Colorado, in my opinion, has been a lack of real investment in branding and marketing and also professional winemakers. Yes, anyone can make wine, but it helps to know what you're doing. But really, it's more about consistency. There are a lot of good wines in Colorado, but are they consistently good year after year? You've got small wineries making 20 different wines. How many of those 20 wines are good? Maybe they need to focus a little bit on, I'm not saying one variety, because that would never work in Colorado, but maybe 5 or 6 varieties, and just make them better. If wine wants to attract a younger demographic, which is the largest demographic there is, to drink wine, then it has to make it a little bit more fun and approachable, and I think that's what we've been more successful at than most people. People have to really embrace the fact that they're in this state, which is a beautiful state, which has this population that wants to embrace them, it wants to like them. You know, if we could get a little bit more investment in branding and marketing and creativity, I think people would start to like their wines a little bit better.
When I introduce people to Colorado wines, 95% of people's first reactions are, wow, I had no idea they made wine in Colorado. And then the questions are like, well, where? And, you know, who's making Colorado wine?
Making wine in Colorado is not easy. Some people have called the pioneers crazy. Others have called them brave. Brutal winters, hail, frosts, consumer indifference, insane competition from established wine regions. Growing grapes at altitude is a risky venture. But the gamble is paying off. In the last several vintages, Colorado has produced hundreds of bottles of award-winning wines that reflect the passions of those who paved the way.
The vicissitudes, the problems we have here are, that's just part of the fun, I think, you know, it is. Count on this, though. There are a number of bottles out there in the liquor store, whatever, that you will find are excellent wine from Colorado.
This lifestyle is a very rewarding experience. We like it a lot. I mean, we're in this pristine area. Within 30 minutes, I can be in 3 different wilderness areas. We got trout fishing right out the back door. We got hiking right out the back door. Skiing, you know, world-class skiing within 2 hours in 3 different directions. The living on the land here is a very rewarding experience. The community that we're in here in Paonia is amazing.
The pruning process, because it's where it all starts, literally planting, pruning, and then the bottling. You know, when it's all done, that feels really good.
You always hear, well, you know, Sonoma's doing this, or Oregon's doing this, or Walla Walla's doing this. And I've tasted wine from all of those regions. Our wines are just as good. They are. I spend so much time tasting other people's wines. I drink more of other people's wines than my own. Our wines in Colorado are just as good and can stand up to anybody else's.
Colorado wine is about producing a quality product in the face of unique adversity. It's about progress and an unwavering spirit that continues to face head-on the difficulties that are inherent in making wine where no one thought possible. Critics, restaurants, and consumers have been put off in the past, but are gradually rediscovering the unique qualities of Colorado wine and seeing just how far the industry has come in the last decade. They are drinking their convictions and giving Colorado a second first chance.
I think a whole lot of people questioned our sanity when we started growing grapes.
I can grow from working in the cellar to being on the slopes in about 2 hours and 15 minutes.
We're pushing the limits of where things can be done.
Inherently chaotic system, but somehow you end up with a work of art in the bottle.
Why do I make wine in Colorado? Because we're crazy. We love it. It's in our blood.